Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And today, this is the favorite time of the month for me. We're going to look at photos with representative from the Bainbridge Island Photo Club, which is a adjunct or partner organization, I guess, with the Senior Community Center. They meet here at the center and just concluded their big bash of the year, which is the presentation of photos for the public viewing on the 4th of July. We'll talk a little bit about that. But today we're going to be talking about Rob Wagoner's program on Slinkies, taking a new look at an old toy. But I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for sponsoring Something to Talk About. Fieldstone offers assisted and independent living along with vibrant memory care. They're located on Rolling Bay, and you can find out about their programs. You can take a tour. You can enjoy a free lunch at their bar and grill. Just call Celia or Jamie at 206-594-1010 or check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. So, Rob, I want to thank you very much for sharing your photos today, and they've been up all month and will continue to be for a little bit longer in the lobby at the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center.
Okay. Yes.
So let's. Do you want to say anything? I'll go to the slides if you want.
Yeah, just put up the first slide's fine.
Great.
That's great. Okay. This one I'm not going to talk much about it because it's pretty self-explanatory. But I started photography seriously about 16 years ago when I retired as an architect, and have been doing it ever since. And I quickly became focused on wanting to look at things in an abstract way, a little bit away from reality. And that's what got my attention, was to how can I look at things and see a different perspective or point of view than is the norm. And so that's kind of what I do in photography, and picking up Slinkies was just part of that process. I wanted to pass on, and I know there's just a couple people here, but to pass on this quote, and this quote has really guided me in terms of what I think I'm interested in photography. And it's, if you start from the position that there's no right or wrong, no good or bad, creativity is just free play with no rules. It is easier to submerge yourself joyfully in the process of making things. We're not playing to win, we're playing to play. And that last sentence is important to me. Working on active play and experimentation until we're happily surprised is how the best work is revealed. And, I take photography and I look at it in those terms. I don't look at it as trying to make the most beautiful scenic picture possible, but I look at it as trying to look at things differently. And I'm not interested in really mountains or streams or cityscapes. I'm interested in looking at places and objects in a unique way, and that's what's captured my interest in photography. As we all know, everybody is a photographer these days with the advent of digital cameras and smartphones. Anybody can take pictures. For a real photographer, what's important is, how do you take a picture of something and look at it in a unique or unusual way that hasn't been captured before? And that's the way I try to look at things when I take a picture. My pictures are generally, snapping my pictures are usually just a step in the process. And this process goes from thinking up an idea about a photograph, taking a picture of something, and then editing it to get to the point I want it to be. So that's kind of the process I go through. So it's really a 3-step process, not just a 1-step thing. And the last thing is that the photographs I have are unusual, and to some they may be interesting, others they may not. I really look at taking pictures as something I do for myself, and if somebody likes or doesn't like it, that's fine with me. So I'm feel free to do what I want to do and not be concerned with what other people think about it. So anyway, with all that in mind, I've taken pictures of Slinkies, and I've done this 3 times over the course of about 16 years. And actually, I have a 4th time coming up because I thought of some new ideas about Slinkies. But Slinkies are a fun subject. They're humorous and they're also kind of sculptural. And I'll show you that in the images I have. So go ahead now, Reed. Okay, this is just a quick thing on some. I went to Wikipedia and looked up Slinkies, and I found some really interesting things. I won't go through all these, but they were invented in 1943 by a mechanical engineer, and he was trying to create springs for some equipment that was difficult to keep steady at sea. And one of his springs fell off the shelf, and I think it fell down a set of stairs, and he realized it walked down the stairs. And so he spent several years perfecting that idea as a toy. And it actually came down to a mathematical formula of springiness and the shape of it and so forth. And so it was kind of a technical thing to come up with. He actually, after the war, he went on to open a company, he and his wife, to make these things. And they had their debut in Gimbels in Philadelphia in 1945. And it was an instant success. And the first 400 sold out in 90 minutes. So it's launched them on a new way and a new industry. The spring steel he ended up using was a Swedish steel. And I assume that's still used today because it had certain springiness qualities to it. He and his wife had created an industry around Slinkies, and that lasted for them for a number of years. And I think it was 1952, a woman actually in Washington State approached him with the idea of you could make Slinky pull toys. And so I'll show you a picture of a Slinky pull toy. But anyway, that was the next evolution of Slinkies. And we all think of them as sort of a humorous toy. And that's somewhat what attracted my attention to look at them in a different way. So that's the sum total of that. So go ahead, Reed.
Okay, yeah, they are a perennial toy. My 4-year-old grandson is enjoying Slinkies, so they haven't gone out of style.
Yeah, and there's been millions of them sold around the world to kids. And yeah, they're just humorous to look at. Okay, just now to talk about photography. As I said, I've looked at Slinkies 3 different times over the last 16 years. And my first, I'll do them in the order of the progression of doing them. And the first effort I made was just taking Slinkies and actually tying the ends together with a piece of wire, and then just manipulating them into different sort of sculptural forms and shapes with a black background. And when I would take these images, different twistings of Slinkies, I'd then go into Photoshop elements and take out the tie wires and the tie strings and the paper clips that created the shapes. And then that would be the image. And I have a couple of small LED lights that have like 100 bulbs each, and they're dimmable. And I just kind of hand position them where I want them light-wise in the images. So that's kind of my initial exploration of Slinky. So go ahead, Reed. Now, this is kind of one of the first things I did with the Slinky is I just basically tied the ends together and set it down and took just an elevation, you call it an architecture of it. And, it's this quasi-circular form, not really a circular form, but the image of a circular form. And I just wanted to overlay it with sort of the contrasting square form. And so I guess it was Topaz is a program that I use a lot. Overlaid a square on it and created this sort of different image of it. Very simple.
Okay, you shot from the top?
Yes, so it was setting on black background and simply shooting down on it. And
Just
then,
sort of like what we saw in the first picture, and then you added the interesting square and distortions in the background.
Yeah, and this was really the most simplistic look at a Slinky that I started out with. And it was just basically tying the ends together, so it made a circle. And that was sort of I used that form a number of times, but this was sort of the untwisted form. It was just simply looking at a Slinky in an interesting way. This shot was in the same time frame, and it's using a 105 millimeter close-up lens and shooting just a small portion of the Slinky, and then adding in a little bit of a blue coloration with lighting, and actually it was a flashlight with some paper over blue paper over it to give the image, and then editing it such that I used what's called a vignette, which is basically darkens corners in a picture. And I used a vignette, but I used a very harsh edge to create a circle vignette rather than just a soft vignette. And so that's how this image came about.
So that's where we see the circular, how it fades out like that. That's the vignette.
Yes, the form, the overall form is a circular vignette with the black around the edges. I mean, the image itself is really would be the full square, but when you put a vignette on it, it basically takes away the corners, and you can do it to different degrees of softness. And in this instance, it was very harsh to create a pretty much a circular hard form. So anyway, this image is using another the same close-up 105 millimeter lens and shooting it. And when you use a lens close up like that, there you get different gradations of what's in focus and what's not. And it's very limited in what's in focus. And it's just what you focus on is the important thing. Everything else starts to become a little blurry. And that's how this came about, was actually focusing on the white lines down in the lower part of the image, and the lines that are curving from left to right, bigger lines. Those are a little out of focus purposefully because that wasn't the focus point in the image. And again, I had it blue with a flashlight and a paper over it. And then this one I actually took in photo, I guess it was Topaz, which is a program for editing photos, and added the upper portion where it's kind of a little cross hatches of lines in it. So, and this one also had some red in it too. I think I used blue and red in over a light, and that's how it got the sort of reddish orange tinge as well as the blue highlights. So.
Yeah, the I guess it's the topaz manipulation that looks like the it almost looks organic, or like stained glass up at the top.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this is my favorite one of all the Slinky pictures I took, and what is compelling to me, I just love the different curvilinear forms that overlay one another and create sort of an interesting pattern. That was what I focused on. So this came to be one of my favorite images, mainly because it's a really truly an abstraction of the object, and it becomes sort of a geometric overlaying different curvilinear forms. And that's what I like about it. Go ahead. Well, now this is just an image that was basically you saw the picture with the camera in it and the paper clips, and over a black background. And this was one of those that where I just tugged and pulled at different parts of the Slinky to create this overlaying lines of curvilinear lines. And I think that's what's interesting about it, is that there's all these different layers of curving lines, and then the shape. Again, to me, it's sort of took a Slinky and made it into a sculptural form. And then I think in Topaz, I actually added the small amount of coloration. I really was torn between leaving these as black and white images or adding a tiny bit of color in them. And I think they're probably as compelling in a black and white image as they are in the color, but for this, I chose to add some color.
I personally like the color, Rob. I think you did really well.
Yeah, I really wanted to keep it as very toned down, so it just is a hint of coloration rather than, I mean, in Topaz, you could make the whole thing really boldly colored. So this is a very small amount of addition. And I did that through pretty much all of these images in this show because I wanted to sort of tie them together. And that seemed like a thing that could tie the different shapes and sculptural images together. Was just a little bit of the same color running through them. So that was purposeful. And this one again is using a 105 macro lens, which is a close-up lens, and shooting it and taking the sort of the hole in the center on through the slinky and making that the center of the image, and then all the curvilinear lines radiating out from that point. And then, like one of the previous ones I showed you, this one I did a very severe vignette around it to create really a circular form. And it's odd to me because of the curvilinear lines in it, it almost looks more egg-shaped than circular. And I think it's a function of the curving lines, particularly up the upper right. It looks like that isn't a real edge of a circle. It looks like it's elongated a little bit. And I think that's just a thing the eye sees because of the curvilinear forms in it. But again, it's just simply an overlay of different curvilinear lines in an interesting way. And that's what I was after in the image. Okay, now, Reed, can you go to, I want to come back to this, but can you go to the next one? Because it sort of just shows how this stuff is done. Okay, and this, I think I showed this at the photo club too, but this is how this next, sort of the second effort at doing Slinkies was done. And I decided I wanted to try putting Slinkies on a mirror and then taking different shots of them with my camera. And again, I used handheld lights to light different ways. So these are basically three Slinkies that are just sitting on a mirror, and you can see the lines that hold them up on the bottom as well as the top because of the reflection. And in this instance, you have a mirror under the Slinkies, which creates the whole circular form because it's mirrored. And you have to have the background above you because the mirror is seeing above you. So you have to have the black background above you to capture it in the mirror. So anyway, it's something
to make the illusion work, it has to look like it's black all around it.
Yes, I think that's true, Reed, unless you purposely add some background, which I did in a couple of these, purposely added a different background. But yeah, they really end up looking like floating forms, basically. Either round or elongated round forms when you mirror them. So I have a whole series. I think I have included a couple other ones that weren't in the show in the lobby just to show you different ways you could use this. So go ahead, Reed.
Should we go back?
Yes, please. I'm sorry. Yes, good. Thanks, Reed. And this is one of the early mirrored images I did some time ago. And this simply was tying a circular form out of a Slinky, and then in the center of it, taking a Slinky and elongating a Slinky, tying it to the mirror down in the middle of the donut Slinky, and then running up above and tying it off overhead. And then what you see in the lower right and the additional Slinky, that's all just mirrored of the main image. And what interested me in it was that even though it's a mirrored image, it has the appearance that the Slinky going down to the far lower right corner is at a different angle than the one going up, even though it's a mirrored image. That intrigued me too, that it had sort of a different sense of it than just being a mirrored image, because it didn't seem like it was the same thing.
Yeah, interesting distortion or illusion.
Yeah, illusion. I think it's partly the angle it was shot from. And again, this wasn't shooting it as if the donut Slinky was flat. It was shooting it as if the donut Slinky was at an angle. So that probably added to it. Okay. And again here, I mean, this is again the second time I worked on Slinkies, and this is a mirror image. And in this case, the mirror image is suspended above the glass. It's not sitting on the glass. So anyway, but the thing that made this more interesting is I rotated the image 90 degrees. So instead of a reflection overhead reflecting down, I turned the whole picture 90 degrees so it looked like these two dancing Slinkies with one another. And I thought that was way more interesting than the one Slinky floating over the other. And again, to me, there's some distortion that happens in the mirroring that creates an image of the two that aren't the same. And I like that concept too, that it just created a different shape, even though it was a mirrored shape. Again, depending on the angle of the shooting, I think is what did that. But it makes it look like two separate objects rather than a mirrored object. And then again, I added a little bit of color that in that to tie it in with the rest of them. This basically was just a very simple donut slinky and a slinky that goes down through the middle of the donut, then lands on the mirror. And when it mirrors itself, you get this horizontal slinky wrapping around, and then two vertical donut slinkies. And again, just it's a mirrored image. And then I obviously changed the background in this one to some color, added some color to the background. And lighting was again using these handheld lights to achieve what I was after. So that's pretty much what that's about. Okay, now here's where and I've done enough, have a number of these to show you, but this is basically taking that idea and moving it even further. These are basically, again, if you turned the whole thing 90 degrees, this would be basically three Slinkies sitting on a mirror. And when you rotate it 90 degrees, it makes them look like they're standing on top of one another, which are in a balancing act. And it makes it totally different sculptural quality to us. They're horizontal, and it makes it sort of, you wonder, well, how can they really stand up like that? But and then this again had a little color added to it, and lighting, handheld lighting. Just another image like the last one, just using different forms in this instance, where it's just simply an unrolled Slinky on top sitting on a mirror, and then a donut Slinky, and then another donut Slinky, but turn 90 degrees on the mirror. So these are all mirrored Slinkies, but they're sitting on the mirror differently to create the forms. And then the whole thing is turned 90 degrees to make it, again, look like they're balancing on top of one another. Yeah, yet another similar image. Again, this was Slinkies, three Slinkies sitting on a mirror, and the mirrored object, and when it's turned 90 degrees, it's this balancing act of Slinkies, even though it was just three mirrors, three images on three Slinkies on a mirror, and then coloration added to it as well. So that's, so it's kind of the same idea, just different forms. Go ahead. Okay, and this one was one of the most recent ones I did. And again, it's the same idea of just Slinkies just sitting on a mirror. But in this instance, I held them apart so they looked like they were floating above one another. And well, they were just sitting on a mirror, and they were sitting on the mirror apart from one another. And then, of course, when you rotate it 90 degrees, it makes them look like they're stacked in the air on top of one another. And then I added the different coloration to the background of this one to give it a little more unique quality. I think this is the last one in this series. This basically, it looks like a complex shape, but it's basically three Slinkies sitting on a mirror with a Slinky on top of those three, and then taking a picture of the mirrored image. And again, the mirroring still, even in this one, looks a little different from the part that's real and the part that's mirrored. And it's kind of I think it's a good thing, because it makes the image not look like a mirrored image, makes it look different. And again, this was setting three Slinkies plus one on top on a mirror, and then when the picture is taken, rotating at 90 degrees, so it looks like they're all kind of floating on top of one another in similar coloration. Okay, now this is my most recent Slinky effort in the last month or two. And this is the third effort, and I do have a fourth in mind, which I'm just trying to get some time to work on it. But so this is just for fun. The next pictures, that's just a shot to show we're moving on to something else. Okay, so I started thinking about, well, I'd like to do something about Slinkies, flying Slinkies, because just again, this is for fun. It's just for humor and to have some fun at doing a photo. And as I said earlier, is that I don't tend to find a nice thing to look at and then take a picture of it. I tend to think about an idea and then compose a picture around the idea, shoot a picture of the idea, and then edit it. And in this case, this was a slinky and marbles sitting on a mirror. And in this case, after I took the picture, the wings going out, I erased, because there was a mirrored image of the marbles in the wing, I erased the lower ones to make the wing look thinner at the far out edges, and manipulated it in that way, and then added the background that's a little ethereal, kind of like almost space-like to it. So the idea was to create this floating flying slinky. So that was where I started with flying slinkies, and then I moved on to taking slinkies and creating a migration of slinkies. So again, I was just having fun with this. And so I took that form that we just saw in the last picture, and I started moving the marbles around to create different wing shapes, and then took a picture. These are all a different picture, each one of them with a different wing shape to the slinky. And shooting it from the side of the slinky. So in some cases, you have a tip of a wing, and then you have a wing. And then in Photoshop Elements, I placed them on a sky background in a migration formation. And then I think in Topaz, I did a little work on it, so the wings didn't really look like marbles. They had a different quality to them. So that's why they don't look like the little round marbles. They look kind of wavy. But that was just a...
They look like an album cover or something. They're cool.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it was trying to just make them something different than the marble. That was what I was after. But I just had fun with this, and it was just, I had this idea that I wanted to do something slinkies in the sky, and this is sort of what I came up with. So yeah, a fun time. Okay, now this one doesn't have anything to do with the last image, and the next one will. And this one was just basically a slinky sitting on a black surface, just on its side, and shooting through it with 6 LED lights in a row, horizontally in a row, and shooting through the slinky, and you'd get all these different shadow patterns behind the slinky. And that was the basic idea. And then in Topaz, I modified it and created the background forms a little different than just the slinky shadow. You can see the slinky shadow shapes radiating out of the slinky because of the 6 lights in a row shining on it. And then the outer part became something else when I edited it in Topaz. So, and then again, a sort of floating background was added to the image. Now the next one, which I know Bob and several others have seen this, but the idea of that migration of slinkies. When I did that, I thought, well, I'd really like to do an image of slinkies in space. And so this is my next evolution, having fun with slinkies. And this was quite a thing to take on, because I ended up taking about, so each one of these is a slinky sitting on a mirror. And I took about 50 different slinkies at slightly different angles from one another, pictures of slinkies at slightly different angles. And then some of them, I took all of them and rotated them 90 degrees, so they looked like they were going horizontally rather than vertically. So that was, each one separately, I rotated 90 degrees. And then some of them I actually flipped upside down, and some of them I just changed the rotation of them a little bit to give a different quality to them. So I had a lot of images to work with. And this actually, I think when I worked on this in Photoshop Elements, it took 90 layers to make this image of all these different slinkies, and some of them reducing the size of them so they were in the distance, and some of them enlarging them so they were in the foreground. And then on the left side, I did a linear gradation of reducing the light on that side to make them recede even more. And then, of course, I added the Earth with the USA in the middle of it, and then added some slight bit of red to it to give these slinkies an idea that they were energized with some kind of form of energy, making them move through space. So anyway, I had really a lot of fun doing it. Took a lot of time, and I actually am making one of these for my grandson's bedroom. He liked it so much, so I have a print of this. So yeah,
Yes,
that
it's very cool, and obviously a labor of love.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not usually much into editing things. I use Lightroom and Photoshop Elements and Topaz, and that's the limit of my knowledge of programs for photography. And I'm really not that interested in the technological side of photography. I'm more interested in coming up with an idea and then executing the idea. And whatever degree it takes to put that idea together is what I'm interested in. And some of it is, yeah. Anyway, okay, I think this is the last one in the series, and this was just, again, 4 Slinkies on a mirror turned sideways. And then when I was doing research in Wikipedia on Slinkies, I came up in 1952. A woman in Washington sent some sketches to the company that makes Slinkies of doing animals, Slinky animals, where if you pull the string, the front would pull forward and then the back would follow because of the Slinky spring. And so there was, in 1952, that was invented. And I thought, well, that'll be interesting. I went to Amazon and found a Slinky dog and decided to put the Slinky dog on this to make it look like it's a rolling thing that the Slinky dog is operating. So again, it's just a fun thing that just sort of evolved into something. Started out with just this 3-4 Slinkies, and then I thought, well, I'm going to make it sort of more fun. So I added the Slinky dog on top of it.
So the dog is obviously added, photoshopped onto
Yes.
the mirrored image.
Yes, exactly. You describe it better than I do, I think. That's okay. And that's the end of the show. And this is basically just 2 Slinkies on a mirror and not turning them sideways, just looking at them with adding a little note on the top. So that's the sum total of it. So anyway,
Great. These are wonderful, wonderful, playful
yeah,
images.
yeah, and that's the point I think of the whole thing that I'd like to make is that really, if you're doing photography, don't do the same thing everybody else is doing when you're shooting a scene or a flower or whatever. Try to look at it in a unique way and come up with your own version of that flower or whatever you may be taking a picture of. And that's how I try to approach photography, was to look at it my own unique way of looking at something. But yeah, no, I just want to have fun with photography, and I don't care if people like it, don't like it. And as that quote at the beginning said, I don't care if I win or lose. I just want to play. So that's how I approach photography. So.
I didn't know I was on camera. Hey, Rob, I have a question. I'm at the senior center. I did not know it was on Zoom. I came here. They
really?
were nice enough to set up the whole thing just for me.
Oh,
so
really?
I missed the front portion. What software do you use to create your images?
As I said kind of at the end, I'm not that interested in the technology of photography. I'm more interested in the idea of photography. What's an idea that I can come up with and portray through photographs? And yeah, I really don't know very much about the technical aspects of photography, but I use Lightroom. I'm really, really an expert at Lightroom. And I use Photoshop Elements a little bit and Topaz a little bit. And that's kind of my limitations. And I'm really not that interested in expanding that repertoire. But
But I think you basically you recreate art images from your original photos. So that approach to me is very unique, very creative. You have infinite choices as far as it can go with your imagination. Yeah.
And that's why I said I have even more ideas about Slinkies, even though I'm probably going to put that off for a little bit. But there'll be a 4th generation coming at some point. But yeah, no, I really look at photography, and this is different than most people. I look at it as coming up in my head with an idea, figuring out how I can execute that idea, and then taking a picture of whatever the setup execution is, and then editing it from there to get to where I want to be. And, part of it is you don't even know where you want to be. Just know you're headed somewhere, and you just keep altering what you're doing until you get something you like. And that's sort of
excellent. One final comment. With that marbles, you laid out that single image with marble laid out, stretched out. If you try some light color, transparent light colored marble strategic play, just one or two here, to just play with, see what comes out.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't. These are little flat marbles. They're not a round marble. I do have round marbles, which I could try that. And so, yeah, and I have actually my fourth generation of Slinkies has a lot to do with marbles as a part of the imagery. And I don't know what it is yet, but I just am going to try to connect those two things, marbles and Slinkies. So
That's playing to play.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you.
So
Reed,
I have
Yes,
I
go
have a question for you about the photo club.
Yes.
I'm going to mention that starting August 1st, we're going to have an exhibit of the best of the People's Choice, I guess,
Yes.
from the 4th of July, and that will also be online.
Mhm.
And we'll
And
talk about that mid-month.
Right. And I can't remember the specific date, but you've set a date for it.
Yeah.
So
It's a Monday mid-month, and so watch for that. I'm wondering, given that you don't have a lot of interest in sort of expanding your technical repertoire, what do you most enjoy about participating in the photo club as an organization of people who are taking pictures together? The themes, or just what?
I've come around to now every time we have a meeting, I do the themes because I try to push myself to focus on a theme, but I try to look at the theme and different than just taking a picture of something. I try to come up with an idea around the theme. So that interests me. And I think probably the main thing I get out of the photo club is I like to show my photos to people. And that's a venue that's there and they can't escape.
Well, that's what we did today too, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share the Slinkies, and I look forward to keeping my eye on the next iteration of the whatever comes up. So thanks a
All
lot.
right. Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Reed. And it's great that you do this.